Okay, folks, the poll results are in. Gooding the Polymath is overtaken Inglorious Rex Volume 1 by a significant enough margin that I think we can call it and get straight in to the Gooding the Polymath reviews, starting with the one thing you don't tell your audience. Now, Rippaverse has been justly lambasted from holding a lot of information way too close to the vest and basically giving readers not a lot to go on. But sometimes it tells its readers a little too much, and here I'm going to cover something that you really don't want to tell your readers. First, we're going to get into some title page quibbles. So on the title page of Gooding, there is this little number. Based on Gooding, created by Eric July and Marcos Rios. Based on? That makes it sound like there is some canonical version of Gooding other than what you're going to see in this book. But that's not really the case, is it? I mean, this is a Rippaverse comic book. That means this is the canonical Gooding. This is not something based on Gooding. This is the guy. So what we should see here instead is Gooding created by Eric July and Marcos Rios, and that gives the creators credit where credit's due, without making us think that somehow we've entered a multiverse and we're just going to see somebody else's version of Gooding. Next, we've got Mike Barron, Will Conrad, and Jay Brown given credits on the title page looking very much like this. And it's impossible not to notice that Mike Barron gets his name in all caps. Will Conrad, on the other hand, only gets upper and lowercase normal, and Jay Brown not only gets upper and lowercase normal, but even his title as colorist, in addition to his name, is in a smaller font. Seriously? You established a visual pecking order on the title page. You know, why can't we just go back to the days of, say, the 1960s Marvel Comics, where they understood back in the days that your writer, your penciler, your inker, penciler and inker both being combined into artist, as Will Conrad is in this case, your colorist and your letterer, they all contribute majorly to the book, and they deserve credit of equal weight. So let's just be egalitarian about the title credits, shall we? Come on, we don't need to have this one-upmanship right there on the page. It's ridiculous. Mike Barron, Will Conrad, and Jay Brown, they all contributed significantly to this book. Now let's get into the real meat of what is on the title page, which is the opening blurb. As I've stated before in my first review of Yaira #1, the opening blurb is used to introduce you either to the character or to at least get you up to speed on what the character and story is so far. And it looks like you're going to have kind of a mix here in the opening blurb for Gooding. So we're going to break it down sentence by sentence, starting at the beginning. Cato Gooding, all right, let's just stop there. We have never heard his first name before. We don't know that this guy's first name is Cato. I would normally call a foul on this. The only reason I'm not going to is because on the very first page of Gooding the Polymath, there is a child referred to as Cato, and you want to know that this is the main character, Gooding. So I'm going to give this a pass and let it go, but just keep in mind that your opening blurb should not be feeding new information to the reader. Your opening blurb should tell you what we already know about the character or the story so far. And one of the things that we didn't have in our arsenal previously was Gooding's first name. However, since it's going to be introduced on the very first page, I'll allow it. Cato Gooding is the eclectic genius of Flores Park. What does that mean? I mean, I know what eclectic genius means, but to be the eclectic genius of a city, it's not like every city has an eclectic genius, nor is the fact that he's an eclectic genius tied in any way to being in or around Flores Park. These are two separate pieces of information, and they should be treated as such. So let's revise this. Cato Gooding is an eclectic genius living outside of Flores Park. His Goodyng services came to save the day. All right, a little bit wordy here. His Goodyng services saved the day when Avery Silman's ranch is not capitalized, was attacked in a blaze. Attacked in a blaze? Who says that? Was set ablaze by the mysterious creatures known as the Devilings. Oh, really? Since when have we ever known them as the Devilings? Now, I have seen the word Devilings before, but I'm pretty sure it was either in the Ripazine article or on the Documon cards, neither of which count as canonical material. So if you want to just deal with the stories that we were given, ISOM number 1, ISOM number 2, Alpha Core number 1, Yaira number 1, then you have to say that these mysterious creatures were never known to anyone as the Devilings. However, they did have a name. They were called Hellions. So what we should see here is by the mysterious creatures known as the Hellions. Now, why is it that Eric July might not want to use Hellions as the name of these creatures? Well, probably because Marvel already had a series called Hellions, dealing with a category of characters in the X-Men universe. So we all know what a pain in the butt trademark violations can be. So probably the reason he doesn't want to use Hellions is for that reason. Let's not get confused with any Marvel characters, especially since Marvel has been known to be litigious on names like that. Back in the day, there was a company called Defiant Comics who had a title called Warriors of Plasm. And despite there having Warriors of in the title, Marvel sued them pretty much out of existence because Marvel had a character called Plasmer. Yeah, those aren't even the same names, but because Plasm, which was the original title of Warriors of Plasm, and Plasmer were coming out at the same time, Marvel sued Defiant Comics and basically bankrupted them. Even after Defiant Comics changed the title to Warriors of Plasm. So, yeah, Marvel's not messing around with stuff like this. If you take a name that's even close to them, they will hoist you up on it. So, why don't we just get rid of trying to name anything about the creatures altogether and just say it was set ablaze by mysterious creatures? But how did this man go from childhood prodigy to self-made man? Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa. Where is any of this in anything we know about Goodyng so far? We don't know any of this. We don't know that he was a childhood prodigy. We certainly don't know that he was a self-made man. For all we know, he's a trust fund baby. So where are you getting this? We can't even intelligently ask this question. We don't have any of those basic facts. You can't do that kind of thing to us. This whole paragraph just needs to be rewritten. And so here's what should be the first portion of the opening blurb. When Avery Silman's ranch was set ablaze by mysterious creatures, Goodyng Services put out the fire and saved the day. Owned and operated by the eclectic genius Cato Goodyng, Goodyng Services provides for-profit subscription-based emergency services to those the nearby city of Florispark can't or won't serve. Now that contains everything that we know about Goodyng so far from ISOM number 2. And so we're not violating any rules of bringing in any unknown information. Now, how about the last sentence? Well, first, the last sentence needs a little bit of a fix on the punctuation. This is a story from underdog to hero, ... When you are dealing with an ellipse that trails off the end of a sentence and it's not actually going to be connected to anything else, you need a fourth dot. So this is his story from underdog to hero, ... Okay, foul again. Wait a minute. What? From underdog to hero? How do we know that he's either of those things? I mean, yeah, he did come and put out a fire, but, we're in the superhero world now, and so, we're kind of trying to figure out how exactly to look at this guy, and we certainly don't know anything about his past where we could gauge him as an underdog. And one of the things that I have heard online is that I've heard a lot of debate over whether Gooding should be thought of as a hero at all. Why? Because he runs a for-profit business. He doesn't just come out and save the day and then leave with doing good having been its own reward. He actually is expecting people to pay for his services. Now, he might, give people things here and there to make people think that those services are worthwhile, but at the end of the day, he's charging money for him to come out and do things like fire suppression, firefighting, crime fighting, investigations, things like that, medical attention, etc., etc. Now, there are people who have really complained up a storm saying, this is not a superhero. A superhero doesn't do this kind of stuff for money. So we know that Gooding is a complex character, but we don't know exactly what to call him. Should we call him a hero? That's really up to the reader. I'm kind of reminded of a CBS TV series called Intelligence, which featured Josh Holloway, who was previously Sawyer on the series Lost. And Josh Holloway played a soldier who had a chip implanted in his brain. And this chip would allow him to contact the internet. It was kind of like having your own Wi-Fi in your skull. And you could interface. It's basically Neuralink before Neuralink ever existed. Except it functions at the level of Google Glass. So this guy has Google Glass in his head, but the way that he's described in the opening credits of the show, as described by his boss, is Gabriel Vaughn, one of our nation's most decorated soldiers. He's a hero. And I remember watching the opening credits for the first time and thinking to myself, you don't get to tell me that. That's not a judgment that you can feed me. That's something I have to come into and conclude on my own. You can tell me, his name is Gabriel Vaughn and he's one of our nation's most decorated soldiers, but whether he's a hero or not, that's actually up to me. I might be one of these, serious jerks who thinks that there's no heroism to soldiering. There's people out there who think that a police officer is no hero, or a firefighter is no hero, or a first responder of any kind is no hero. I've met people like this. Your reader is going to come with his own set of biases, presuppositions, prejudices, etc., and he's going to come and evaluate your characters for himself or herself. And you need to allow that. You can't just put a stamp of what you want the reader to think about your character, because this is especially true if you're dealing with a complex character. Now, Josh Holloway's character in Intelligence, he was pretty much one note. I mean, he was a decent guy who happened to lose his wife to a terrorist operation, and now he's got this chip in his head, and he's using it as well as his soldiering skills to fight terrorism. So, not a real complex character who was built up here. But what about somebody like Gregory House? What if you're dealing with a guy who is in constant pain, and he is addicted to painkillers, and he's irascible, he's rude, but he's also compassionate, and he's also very smart and good at his job? How do you think of this character? Do you think of this guy as a hero, or do you allow the negative aspects of him to outweigh the positive aspects? That's really up to the viewer. Same thing with Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes, who was a self-described high-functioning sociopath. This is a character who it's kind of hard to like, as Watson definitely found out throughout the course of the series. He will basically turn your life into chaos, and he won't mind. He will do things to manipulate you and drive you in certain ways and not tell you what he's thinking, not tell you what he's planning. He can run roughshod over your entire life and just frankly not care if he thinks that it is for the greater good. Is that really a hero, or is it something more complex than that? Is it something where you might actually think he's more of an anti-hero? How about Darth Vader? Depending on whether you've seen only the original trilogy, or whether you've seen the prequel trilogy, You might think he's either really imposing and intimidating and evil personified, or you might think he's a whiny brat. You might think he's a pathetic loser. It depends. It depends on how much you've seen of the character and what you weigh more heavily in your mind. Do you look at him as somebody to fear or somebody to just loathe for being so small? All of this is to say, you can't tell us Gooding is a hero. That's our judgment to make. And so, you can't even tell us before that he's an underdog. Because who knows? You might have a reader who looks at Gooding's early life and thinks, boy, I wish I had it that good. That guy looks like he had so many privileges compared to me. So, giving your character these labels and expecting the reader to just blindly suck them up and incorporate them into the reader's way of thinking, that's not what you want to do. Instead, leave it completely vague. Just say, but who is Cato Gooding? This is his story. And then go into the story and let your reader conclude what he will. Because ultimately, that's what the reader's going to do. You don't want the reader fighting your judgment, and you can't overrule your reader. The only thing that you can really possibly do is steer your reader toward the conclusion that you want your reader to come to by presenting the kind of evidence in favor of your own stance. If you want the reader to think of Gooding as a hero, then you have to show Gooding doing heroic things, saying heroic things, thinking heroic thoughts. All that is within your power to show the reader, and then when the reader encounters all that, then the reader will be like, oh, this person's displaying a lot of heroic behavior. Likewise, if you want somebody like your villain in the story to be despised, you have to have your villain doing despicable things, saying despicable things, thinking despicable thoughts, and then your reader will come to the conclusion that the villain is despicable. But what you don't do is tell your audience what to feel about your characters. That is ultimately going to be up to your audience to decide, and you have to leave that in the audience's hands. So, this is my first review on Gooding the Polymath, and I will be getting into the meat of the story. Yes, we will actually be covering some story pages after this, but that will be next time. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Mike Partika. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and I will talk to you later.